Dr. Thornton, could you introduce yourself for us?
Yes, my name is Gabriela Marin Thornton, and I am a senior lecturer at the Bush School of Government and Public Service. I teach classes in European Union, NATO, and international relations.
Fabulous. And we're so happy to have you with us today.
Well, I'm happy to be here.
And so we wanted to know from your perspective, what is the European Union?
That is a very complicated question, and I'm going to start with what most people think it is. So when people generally refer to the European Union, they think it's just an economic body, a common market. And indeed, a part of the European Union, a significant part, is the common market. But also the European Union has a social dimension and also has a political dimension. Both dimension, political and social, are not as strong as the economic dimension. The economic dimension on the international stage is very strong, but they still have a political, a social, and to a certain extent, a security dimension that most people overlook. However, it's a sui generis body, a body in construction. And what I like generally to say to my students is to not forget that in its inception, the European Union actually was and still remains a form of conflict prevention. Even if people think immediately economics, the basis of all this has been conflict prevention.
That's really interesting, and it's an interesting perspective, especially because I suppose it originally began because it wanted to consolidate the means to create war, correct?
It was to eradicate war, so to prevent conflict. And it's very interesting because it was not created to prevent enemies to come into the European territory. Actually, the enemy was inside. Europeans were the ones that were fighting with each other. So the way it was created is to prevent conflict within the European Union, within member states, in Europe, basically.
How successful do you think it has been doing at preventing military conflict?
Oh, I think it's extremely successful. I think it's successful in the sense that if you look at the international system, most of us still talk about anarchy, still talk about balance of power, and all sorts of realist concepts. When it comes to the European Union, we talk about a subsystem of the international system in which anarchy, it's maturating. It's a mature anarchy, does not exist. Those people do not arm themselves against each other. There is no security dilemma. It has been eradicated. So in terms of eradicating conflict among its members has been a very, very successful project.
Wonderful. What do you think some of the biggest successes of the European Union have been?
First, it was eradicating war. Second, it was thought that integrating Spain, Portugal, and Greece, and helping them to the path of democracy has been a great success. Now, certainly with the unfolding of the economic crisis, we saw that those countries have a lot of problems. But if you ask the Eastern Europeans, probably for them, has been very successful because after the fall of the Soviet Union, Eastern Europe was left in a vacuum that was filled by the United States of America using NATO and by the European Union working with those countries towards democracy.
Tell us, who do you think are some of the biggest players in the European Union? Whether that means individual countries or the institutions themselves or individual European politicians.
Yes, there are different players and at different levels. There are powerful institutions, such as the European Commission, which is supranational. And you're gonna, initially it had all these economic activities lumped under the European Commission. Right now you can see that there are security type of activities that are migrating from the Council of the European Union into the community, which gives you an idea that we're looking at more and more integration. Of course, the Council of the European Union, in which the interest of the member states is represented, remains arguably one of the most powerful institutions. And also over the past decades, the Parliament has obtained a lot of power in terms of co-decision procedure. Now, if you go to member states, we used to teach our students that basically before the enlargement, the axis, the German Franco axis, Germany and France and Great Britain were the most important actors. Now, things have changed. Germany has become the most successful country in the European Union. France is not doing well, so we're not quite seeing that engine that you can read in all EU books about functioning. Great Britain is facing its own problem, secessionist problems, and we will be seeing in the fall if Scotland goes or not. And if Scotland goes, Great Britain is not going to be a big actor anymore in the European Union. And on the other hand, we see some new actors coming up, such as Poland, a very large country, a country that is starting to establish the tone of EU policies, a country that is asserting itself very much, collaborates with Germany more or less, but I would say West, we're looking at Germany as a whole, we're looking at Germany as the most powerful country, but the second one coming very strongly, it is Poland, and it comes from the eastern space, in my interpretation.
It's very interesting. In my experience, I have been taught that the Commission was actually more powerful than maybe the Council of Ministers. Is that correct or incorrect in your opinion?
It's a debate.
It's a debate.
It's a debate. And it's a debate, I think, basically on political line. People in the European Union that we actually call integrationists, supranationalists, they will tell you that the Commission is the most important institution, of course, because the Commission is a supranational institution. Mm-hmm. People who are intergovernmentalists, they will look at the Council and they will say, this is the most important institution. I think the question is not quite what is the most important institution. The question is, are we reverting to intergovernmentalism, which will make the Council of the European Union more important, former Council of Ministers, or we're still going and integrating. In this case, the Commission will still be powerful, but we would like to see the Parliament somehow catching up, being the only elected body of the European Union.
Why would you say the United Kingdom wouldn't be as powerful if Scotland leaves?
First of all, because any country that leaves parts of its territory, loses parts of its territory, mm-hmm. generally kind of goes down. You cannot keep your territory together. It's going to be hard to consider yourself one of the biggest players. Think about like the United States of America will lose the South. That's going to be a blow internationally. So generally when you lose territory, internationally it's going to be a blow. On the other hand, you could make the case it's going to be important because we have so much anti-EU rhetoric coming. So it's going to have a negative impact on the EU. My humble opinion here is very similar to that of Charles de Gaulle, former French president. Actually, if the Brits wanted to go out, the Lisbon Treaty is there, provides for a procedure to go out, and they can go out. European Union will survive without them.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. This thing's kind of... Very good. All right. Huh?
I said my boy to go.
Yeah, she's really into French politics. And so, and I think this is what I told you I was going to ask you a little more about. But Dr. Thornton, tell us a little bit about the strategic issues that are facing the European Union.
In strategic terms, let me put it like this. Let's look at the issues, important issues first that are that the European Union is facing at this moment. And those issues are security issues, and are economic issues, are migration issues, and one other issue is the rise in nationalism. That we see this phenomena we can register in East and West. Now, in terms of security, there is pretty clear at this point that there is a lot of instability at the EU borders, the situation in Ukraine. It is very challenges for the EU, very challenging. It is going to lead to the cooling, and already led to the cooling up relation with Russia. However, more important is that you have Eastern European member states in the EU, particularly the Baltic states, Poland, and to some extent Romania, that are extremely afraid of some kind of Russian invasion. So those states are afraid as in the East. But if you look at the West, and if you look at Western Europe, basically this fear is not fully reciprocated. So you have a split there. Western Europeans are more benign when it comes to Russia, while Eastern Europeans are very benign. Now that Europe is split is nothing new. I mean, you have there international issues and kind of split, but this is actually an important issue. It's an important issue because if there will be any provocation, if the Russians decide to go further into Ukraine, we may be in trouble, and a real strategy to address Russia will have to be crafted by the Europeans and the United States together. Now, in terms of migration issues that are very important, those are in two plans. One of the plans is the fact that we have a lot of migrants coming from the Middle East, and particularly those countries that failed into their transition towards any kind of democracy. They are entering Europe via Turkey. Syria is a problem. A lot of Syrians are entering via Turkey. And to a large extent, the Middle East, it is Europe's backyard. And Europeans will be much more affected, and are much more affected by this, in my interpretation, than the United States of America. The other issue is a movement, particularly in the European Union, from east to west, of a population that is called Roma. And that created a lot of problems in Western European countries, in the sense that most Western European countries do not want to deal with this population. They do not want to recognize that actually they are not migrants. They are citizens of the European Union, and they benefit from the free movement of people. There are certainly some economic problems, and this particular issue is linked to the rise of nationalism. We see a lot of nationalist parties on the rise in France, and in the Nordic countries of the European Union, but also we see the rise in nationalism in Eastern Europe, such as Hungary, the Jobbik party, which campaigns they got the rhetoric down, but their main rhetoric is anti-Roma, anti-Jewish, or parties such as Attack in Bulgaria, which is a very strong nationalist party who's presently back in Russia. Other type of issues, there are economic issues. So economically speaking, the European Union needs to get its house in order.
Mm-hmm. And you spoke a little bit about Ukraine. I didn't know if you wanted to elaborate on what you think the future of that area is, or can anyone know at this point things are changing every day, it seems.
I think to a certain extent I'm going to be in a minority here explaining, the situation in Ukraine now. I mean, the most common view in the United States and Europe is that Russia basically was in violation of all international laws, and it's a deviant state, if I can call it right now. And I mean, I'm not saying this is not true. Absolutely, it is true. Russia is in violation of lots of treaties and international law, and is acting right now as a deviant state. However, was that not to be expected? That's a question. It was to be expected for various reasons. First of all, because the West, by trying to press on Ukraine, 2008, the NATO summit, trying to take Ukraine in as a NATO member or offering Ukraine membership action plan. Then even the EU neighborhood partnership, which was not successful. But Russia perceived actually all this, or the Eastern Partnership, all these actions from the West, such as an encroaching on Ukraine. You need to remember that also Russia perceives Ukraine as its own territory, not necessarily as a former Soviet territory, but as the territory of a Russian empire. So for them the stakes are very high. Now, on the other hand, Ukraine is a very new nation, a new state first. But we see right now the nation is not quite consolidated. So I think probably it should have been left alone to create first its own strong state, its own strong nation. However, the West always thought that Russia will encroach, and we know Russia was encroaching, the gas crisis, freezing the Ukraine and stuff like that. So, bottom line, I don't think the situation was unexpected. What I think is the West wasn't prepared for. And this is not good when we cannot anticipate a crisis. It was in the cards that at a certain moment, if the West puts pressure on Ukraine, Russia is going to react. And it did.
Thanks for that on the possible future for the Ukraine. Now, what do you think about the future for the European Union? Where do you see that future lying internationally, domestic? Do you see more enlargement? Do you see further integration?
It's hard to talk right now, particularly when you are in an economic crisis, and then you went through phases like this, which we generally call these phases renationalization, when everybody goes kind of home and we hear a lot of nationalistic discourses and so forth. Now, this is one thing. If you closely look at what is happening, you probably will see more integration because of this economic crisis. That will be my opinion. On the other hand, do I see more enlargements? I do see some enlargement with the countries in the former Yugoslavian space, and I think this is about it. It's not going to go east, it's not going to go to Ukraine in my interpretation, but does Serbia have a chance? Yes, I think so. It might be far away, yes, but the European Union is not going to go to Ukraine, and it's not going to go to Turkey.
And my question, I think a lot of students here will have this question, is how important is the European Union to the United States? What is the relationship between the United States and the European Union?
Well, it's very important, and I actually, it baffles me when people kind of are not clear, how important this relationship it is. And it has three dimensions on which it's important. It's important security-wise. Remember, we have this alliance, the NATO alliance, in which most European member states are NATO member states. And of course it's important, you see it right now vis-a-vis Ukraine. You see the Baltics calling upon the United States of America to deploy more forces, to do more exercising, it's called upon us. So we have this military alliance, and generally military alliance have some parts that are good and some parts that might be bad. And the bad part is a part that we call entrapment, that the United States of America may be entrapped in some kind of wars because of this alliance. Now, personally, I don't think the United States of America can be entrapped in anything that the United States of America doesn't want to go for. And Article 5 does not, in NATO, does not quite require the United States of America to militarily intervene. It requires to do whatever in its power to defend the other NATO members. However, it's still a very important military alliance in my interpretation, and right now we see coming at the fore of the international politics. We read about what NATO does every day with respect to Ukraine, deploys forces. Countries, Eastern European countries, are asking for those forces, and does military exercises and so forth. So in terms of security, it's extremely important. The United States of America and most of the European states are linked through this alliance. It's a military alliance. Now economically, it's extremely important. And again, people just talk about China and economics. And if you look at the amount of investment that the European Union puts in the United States for us, actually China doesn't even come close to that. And I just pulled some, just a few things from the European Commission website. Basically, the total investment of the European Union in the US is 3 times higher than in all of Asia. All of Asia. So the EU is investing in us 3 times more than they invest in all of Asia. So it's an important actor, it's trading with us, but more it's investing tremendously, which for us, it's very important. Now economically, there is another dimension. It is the ideological dimension on which most scholars who are liberal internationalists like to focus on. It's the dimension of values, of democracy, of is the whole idea from where the democratic peace theory comes, that democracies don't go to war with each other. There is a security space that we created, that it's common, in which wars will not happen between the US or any other European states. Because of our values, because of the institutions that we created, and generally institutions foster cooperation, foster transparency, reduce cost of transactions, and so forth. So from this point of view, you will have people that will say, yes, but the US and the EU interests diverge. Or NATO is in a crisis. Well, NATO has been in a crisis, it has been formed. So, and if a crisis is all the time and the institution is still there, then we have a constant I might as well not even care about if the organization survives. So yeah, it's extremely important.
I think those are all the questions I had. Do you have anything else to add that we didn't cover?
I think everybody should be following right now the events in Ukraine to see if the EU can come with a common response together with the United States of America. It's very interesting to see what's going to happen if the Russians will go to Transnistria next. I don't think they will go to the Baltics, although the Baltics are extremely worried about that, but I don't think they will go. But I think it's a possibility to go to Transnistria, which means it's going to touch Moldova, which means somehow maybe they have to open a corridor in Ukraine, the Russians, to reach Transnistria. So there'll be extremely important times for NATO and for the partnership between the US and the EU.
Well, thank you very much for your
You're
help.
very
I think-
welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much.